I think that the Australian public don't like politics for politics' sake, even though we really like elections.
Yeah, and it'll give us something to talk about in the podcast.
I think we're cocky.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a problem right now. I think we're pretty cocky.
Yeah, fair play. The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in 2025, then hit us up at dunstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members as well. And you can join our community for free or for as little as $1.50 a month. And you too can help support this podcast. All paid members receive a welcome gift. So if you have recently signed up, please check your inbox for a message from our producer asking for your shipping address, because without that, then we can't send you your merch. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. For over a century, Maurice Blackburn has stood up for fairness, championing the rights of everyday Australians and shaping landmark legal reforms. Today, they're harnessing new technologies to make justice more accessible, more efficient, and more responsive to the needs of modern Australia. All right, let's get on with today's episode. We are taping this one on a Wednesday afternoon on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. And this week for the episode, we're trialling something a little bit different. We're doing a mailbag episode, partly because when we did our last episode of the Feeney Files with Jesse McCrone, we actually ran out of time. I think we bit off more than we could chew in terms of the topics and things that we wanted to talk about.
Too many opinions.
Way too many opinions. So I felt bad about that. But then we had a bunch of questions that we weren't going to get to anyway in that episode. So I thought, well, why don't we just do one big mailbag episode? And the other idea I got from was I read The Athletic, which is basically a US-based sports web page thing that does all the major sports anyway. And every now and then they do like a mailbag.
Eloquently explained there.
Thank you. Every now and then they do like for Notre Dame, the Notre Dame beat writer once a month will do like a mailbag so everyone can write in their questions. And they're really good questions and the answers are great and quite informative. So we thought, well, we've got an audience of dedicated, loyal listeners, so why don't we find out what they want to find out about as well and put it up to myself and that voice that you can hear in the background, which I will introduce now. She is the former Deputy Chief of Staff to Premier Daniel Andrews and a Managing Partner at FMRS Advisory. Jesse McCrone, welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Thank you for having me, Stephen.
And so we've got all these questions from our Patreon. Actually, they're all from our Patreon listeners. If you aren't a subscriber to Patreon is kind of like our online community. You can be a paid member, which helps support the show, or you don't have to be a paid member. You can just be a member. So all of our questions have come from our Patreon listeners, and we'll always give priority to our paid members with their questions. And so we've got a bunch of questions today, Jesse, to get into. Okay, so our first question comes from Capital Bomber. That's the great thing about being a member of Patreon. You can just make up a name.
ASIO have a copy of that name.
Yeah, Capital Bomber. Yeah. Are they an Essendon fan that lives in Canberra?
Let's go with that.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's what it is. Anyway, Capital Bomber asks, former Prime Minister and Labor hero PJK, Paul Keating, my hero as well, once said, if a government makes the changes and does them earnestly, the electorate will give you a tick. And Capital Bomber goes on to say that we have a huge problem presently in Australia that requires the taxation system to be reformed. So his question is, should the government spend its political capital that I guess it earned at the last federal election with a swag of seats and actually take on tax reform for future generations? What do you think about that idea, Jesse?
I agree with PJK's general view that governments are kind of expected to do the bread and butter and do it well and competently. And if you do those things, they give you more space to sort of lean into other areas and do other things. I think that the little I know about the Hawke Keating years, certainly they built a base of being a competent, conservative, not in an ideological sense, but like cautious government at the start before they, floated the dollar and all these sort of other exciting things. So I think that if anyone knows the value of doing the basics right and building the case for something, I think it is Paul Keating. I think the other thing about going into a fresh term, especially with the wind in the sails that the federal Labor government has, is that you shouldn't conceive of the government and the term in a holistic way. And you don't get to reform everything at once. And they have made significant election commitments around significant reform in the health area. And I think that that is exciting and they should do that, but that is not necessarily going to be easy, even if it was popular. So it really is a question of what is the whole agenda the Prime Minister has and what is he prepared to have his fights on and what does he want to keep his powder dry on. I personally would think that tax reform is a good thing for the federal Labor government to engage on and I think we're seeing green shoots of that with the roundtable the Treasurer is having. I don't know that they are going to run at it in the way that some Labor party members may be very keen on. I think the scars of former administrations live large in the memory of the current Labor caucus. Capital gains tax, for instance, franking credits, like all of negative gearing, all of that like there is a deep history and knowledge of how that was executed and what that meant for their vote. I still think that there is a way to make the argument to the electorate, but you have to be prepared to put a lot of time and energy in it. And I think if the referendum taught us anything, that like if you have a vision and a view, you have to put a lot of time and effort into explaining it to people and convincing them of it. So I think once bitten, twice shy, and some of the really big, visionary stuff that Albo tried out, it will be interesting to see what they pick as part of their agenda.
And I guess it's now or never, right? Like not waiting until the third term to do this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that, look, the victory will have surprised them. I think that they will have had a better sense of it earlier than the rest of the community. But I don't think they were running, at the end of their term into this is the massive agenda we're going to have for our huge victory that comes on the other side. But they did take the time before returning to Parliament. They gave their ministers the space to learn their portfolios. I'm hoping Cabinet have met and talked about the big ideas that they have, and the Prime Minister can make his decisions about what he wants the Labor government's legacy to be for this term, and sorted through it and picked the fights he's prepared to have. Some of them were opportunistic. And Stephen, I know you did a podcast on this during the Andrews government about how Daniel always took a crisis and tried to turn it into a reform opportunity. And so they happen, but what are the ones you plan and you want to execute?
And they most certainly didn't, or they certainly listened to the advice of Paul Keating and not take taxation reform to the election as well. And for the listeners out there, I want to tell you a story that was told to me by Peter Mandelson, or he's now known as Lord Mandelson. And for those of you who know Peter Mandelson, he kind of is one of the many architects of the new Labor rise of Tony Blair and the modernisation of the Labor Party in the UK, of which there are many people that can be on that list. But Peter Mandelson was one of them. And he was telling me this story. I did a podcast with Lord Mandelson a while ago. I can't even remember if I did it for this show or if I did it. Yeah, well, I did it. Yeah, did it.
Yeah, it was this show.
It was this. It was. Yeah.
Yep. He thought our house was excellent.
He did. And as he's wandering around the lounge room, he said after, and this is after the show, I was like, oh, why didn't you say this on the fucking episode? This would have been great. Anyway, he goes, because I had a picture of Paul Keating just on the ground, unframed and not hung up yet. And he said, Stephen, I remember when Tony came out to Australia when he was opposition leader for the Labor Party in Britain, and he had met with, this is like, early 1996, and Paul Keating is still Prime Minister here in Australia, and he came home and he had a meeting with me, and I said, how did it go? And he said I had the most extraordinary meeting with the Prime Minister Paul Keating, in which I had said to him that, for the upcoming general election in the UK in 97, that we were going to take tax reform and in particular the raising of taxes to the electorate. And do you know what he did? Peter, you know what he did? He stormed across the room towards me and he grabbed my suit jacket with both hands and throttled me and said to me, Tony, under no fucking circumstances are you going to be taking tax reform to this next fucking election. Are you fucking mad? And I was just completely stunned. And I said to Peter, and what did he do? Well, we certainly didn't take fucking tax reform to the election, that's for sure.
Look,
And
I
they
think
won.
he didn't say it on the podcast because he was very keen for you to do the accent in retelling that story.
Yeah, no, I didn't even know what Tony Blair sounds like that really in my head. But anyway.
That's New Labour. That
Yeah,
accent you just did.
Yeah. How's that? Old Pete. What a cracker. Anyway.
But you make a good point about a mandate, and like I have more of a view that the mandate is more useful than others. I do think it is challenging to look, they didn't rule out tax reform as part of the election agenda, but you really do have to explain it to people if you haven't taken it to an election.
Yeah, John
as
Howard.
To why it's necessary.
John Howard ruled out a GST and then brought in a GST. So
yeah, and that went really well for the next election. Like had we done things slightly differently, we would have won.
Yeah, well, the risk paid off, didn't it? And then he went on to win 4 terms and.
He learned his mistake, though. When did he take another controversial idea to an election?
Yeah.
Work choices was a post-election little malarch.
Yeah, he got cocky. Anyway, very good question. Thank you, Essendon fan of Canberra. Let's go on to our next question, which is from arguably someone I think would be in our top 5 most dedicated supporters of the podcast, Kazza Boots.
I was going to say, can you let me guess? Because I think Kazza Boots would be who I would say.
I absolutely. So, Kazza, thank you so much. One, for your support of the show and constantly retweeting and liking all of our stuff, but also for your question today. And funnily enough, it was certainly very relevant when you sent it through. And then things have moved so quickly in Tasmanian politics that as of an hour ago, it's a little bit dated, but I still want to ask the question so we can just talk about Tassie politics in general. Kazza asks, hopefully Dean Winter, which is the Labor opposition leader, does try to form a government in Tasmania. That way people will know him for the next election. In other words, and she was sort of saying this is an unanswerable question unless you can get an answer. What is the future of what's going to happen in Tassie? Well, now we know because.
But do we?
Well, at this stage we do it. Well, okay, we can. I mean, as I said, we're taping this at 4:30 in the afternoon on Wednesday, the 6th of August, and at this moment, the Tasmanian Premier Rockliff went and visited the governor and was able to get a commission for the formation of a new government, a new Liberal government. The grounds for it, which came from the governor, and I think her surname is Baker, she says, in a hung parliament where no one clearly holds the confidence of the majority of the House of Assembly, the incumbent has the right to remain in office in order to test the numbers in the House of Assembly for the Parliament to have the final say in who should be Premier. I consider the convention of incumbency applies in the current circumstances. I shall reappoint the Premier. It is better for confidence to be determined inside and not outside of the Parliament. And then subsequently, Labor leader Dean Winter came out and said a motion of no confidence would be tabled on the first day of the new Parliament by either Labor or the crossbench. So yes, when you say, did it? Yeah, you're right. Well, at this point in time, Tasmania has a Premier. Will they still have a Premier come that first session of Parliament? That's to be seen.
I am so critical of this, absolute chicken on steroids game that is happening in Tasmania right now, and I'm sure we'll go into some detail. I would be interested, does it say in any of the reporting, did the governor ask Dean Winters whether he felt he had confidence?
In the article I just read before we jumped online, it didn't. I don't even know if the governor even asked or requested for Dean Winter to come and visit her and to see if Labor could supply.
Obviously, I am not a learned constitutional expert. I do find it interesting that they would sort of say, like, it's better tested inside. I would have thought when the Premier turns up and says, I can't guarantee supply, but you should make me the Premier and back incumbency, I would have thought that they would ask the opposition leader whether they felt confident they could form government, which I don't think Dean Winters is right now. I don't think that they are in a position to say, yes, Labor can form a minority government. So I'm just interested whether they asked.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you and I and David Feeney, when we were on the show the other week, David and I sided on one side of this argument and you were on the other. You were still wanting to try and pursue an avenue by which Dean Winter and Labor could form a minority government. And David and I, our view, hang on a minute.
Mm-hmm.
David and I, well, you can put your argument in a minute. David and I were of the view that we should just let the Liberals sink on a sinking, leaky ship with this weird glad bag of crossbench MPs for the next 4 years and just run the state into the ground. My words, not David's.
I think you've misrepresented my position.
And I still think they should do that.
What I said is they should let the Liberals go first, as is convention. But if he cannot form government, it is incumbent upon the opposition to try and make the parliament that's been delivered work. That is my view. It is not my view that Dean Winters should be doing the sneaky to try and like cobble together a weird parliament. I just think that if Rockliff is not able, we talk a bit about audience on the show, about giving your message to audience and persuading them. And I think Rockliff has approached this post-election period as though the Tasmanian voter are the audience that he should be speaking to. And they are an audience. But it feels to me that his approach to the post-election period has been to only speak to voters have voted for him and not the crossbench. And I think Dean Winters has been far better at trying to manage through the audience of 10 that he has to actually form government. So I think that I'm not entirely disagreeing that it would be beneficial to the Labor Party for the Liberal Party to completely destroy themselves as government. But I do think that if the Liberals couldn't form government, it is incumbent on Labor to attempt it. Because I don't think sending people back to the polls is what they've asked for right now.
No, and I think that you were saying off air during the week as well is that the Liberal Party leadership had made a bit of a hash of the negotiations.
Yeah, they have.
Crossbench, some of the crossbench MPs anyway.
Yeah, they've had crossbenchers come out and basically call the Liberal government out for being arrogant, for not considering the fact that crossbenchers now have a legitimate role in decision making, and have just essentially messaged to the public that this is an invalid sort of outcome. I'd be very angry about that if I was an independent. So I kind of agree with Kazza Boots in the sense that if there is a minority parliament returned and the minority parliament will not support the current Premier, the incumbent Premier, it is incumbent upon the opposition leader to try and form a government before sending everyone back to the polls. I just think that you then end up in this ongoing loop. And what Rockliff right now is trying to frame Labor for, again, sending Tasmanians back to the polls. And I think that's going to be worse for Labor than attempting to try and form a minority government.
Yeah, but I guess that's the point I'm trying to make is that if I was Dean Winter, I wouldn't send Tasmanians back to the polls. I would just simply state, well, I'm not going to attempt to form a minority government. And
so you're not going to pass the no confidence?
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't move that no confidence. And just watch the Liberals and the crossbench grapple with this idea of it's not even a minority government because they clearly can't get on. They haven't even been able to negotiate a minority government now. So just let them try and run that out for the next 4 years. It'll be an absolute disaster.
I do think it is the height of arrogance to get the governor to reappoint you without any sort of agreement about your governance arrangements.
Yeah, good.
Yes, look, I personally agree that it would be better if Labor was going to back a no confidence motion, it would be better to be on an issue of substance than an issue of process. So walking back first day and saying, let's go back to the polls is an issue of process. It is not an issue of substance.
Yeah. Next topic, next question. And this one comes from Joe. So thank you, Joe, for your question. What do you believe is the tangible influence FriendlyJordies has, and why does a chunk of the Labor Party despise him? She goes on to say Jordan Shanks is his real name, has expressed that he does not believe he's very influential and that most Labor apparatchiks hate him. And Joe sort of, maybe because he's not PC and is a bit conspiratorial, he has stopped me from becoming a Greens voter. That's an interesting question, Joe. And I don't know, do you want to take a first swing at this, or do you want me to have a bit of a...
Well, I'm just going to say, I'm going to sound a little bit like the guy from Mad Men. I don't think the apparatchiks spend a lot of time thinking about FriendlyJordies. Like, I am surprised to hear that there is this view that there is a wave of dislike of FriendlyJordies within the apparatchik class of the Labor Party. He has not been a subject of heated debate that I have ever been involved in.
Yeah, and I did go looking for that online because I was the same. I didn't know that there was a chunk of the party that despises him. I mean, my backstory to first uncovering or coming across him was when I was working at head office, and Conrad French, who was in our digital team at the time, called me and said, "Come and take a look at this." It was just a YouTube video of this bloke, and I just stood there and watched it. And my first impressions were he was overtly anti-liberal and incredibly funny. So I just immediately assumed he was a Green, you know. And then he started in the video. He started getting
funny Greens. Do you know?
Well, not many, but I mean, I just naturally just went to, well, he's anti-liberal, but he's just not one of us.
He's not
right?
necessarily ours.
Yeah, and then he started to get stuck into the Greens. I was like, oh, hello, what's going on here? And then he started to really talk up Labor, and I was just stunned that we had someone in our corner, you know, in that kind of world. It was funny. It's accessible. It was sharp. It was really good content, and I'm so pleased. I think that was like 2016, and I'm so glad that, you know, it's almost 11 years later and he's still going strong. And if you look at his, you know, the question from Joe is he influential? And I'm certainly not an expert on this sort of stuff, but, you know, his YouTube videos are consistently getting 200 to 300,000 views. And, you know, I think he's important. I think he's a really influential voice in an online space where traditional politicians don't really make an impact. And the fact that, you know, we have someone of influence that is making a contribution in a pro-Labor way is really, really positive. And I think that, you know, we should get out of his way and let him cook. Like, I don't know, maybe there are apparatchiks who are like, oh, you can't say that, or you can't swear, or you can't do this. Or, you know, well, that's okay. We need more of that. You know,
absolutely.
I think party surrogate is that your voice is different to the mainstream political message, which we'll get into. I've got questions on that in a minute as well. But
yeah, and I think that we have talked a little bit about my criticism of the Labor caucus MPs, but also my criticism of some of the Labor caucus MPs when it comes to their digital strategies and trying to sort of pretend they're influencers and sort of clout chase about different stuff. We need this broad church of people that are getting to spaces where MPs are not welcome and are not going to be very good. So having people that can talk to cohorts that, you know, Albo's 2-camera videos aren't necessarily going to hit, I think that is a good thing. And I think this idea that, so it is very important for the Labor Party to be consistent and on message and cut through, but that does not mean that we should not advocate for and support having a broader range of voices who have similar philosophical views. I don't know that FriendlyJordies is a member of the Labor Party. Maybe he is. But certainly that advocate for the cause, because we are broadly a movement. And just because, for instance, one union is going to think something doesn't mean that that is the view of the Labor Party, but we all broadly are moving in the same direction. So having these different types of voices out there prosecuting the case, I think is a really good thing. I didn't think he was as funny as you think he is. I found his manner a little manic. But I think that clearly there's an audience that really, like, there's a bigger audience listen to him that certainly listen to me. And I think that there's a place for him. I think there should be more people like him. I think the Greens have been good at propagating that kind of support that suggests that they are beyond politics, that they are in some way a movement for good and change. And the more we can embrace people like the FriendlyJordies, I think the more the Labor Party can fill that space.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, I remember in my early days at head office, we wanted to set up a almost like a I'll use the word pack, but it's not a pack. Like, it's not a pack, but I'm just trying to, like, a body that could organize third-party voices from influential spaces to support Labor, and it was mostly in the arts community. And what we discovered was anyone that was, I mean, most people in the arts community are, by nature of who they are, you know, artistic
Creative.
and expressive and creative. They normally lean left wing, right? And it's like most artists in Scotland are Celtic supporters because we're naturally creative people. You know, apart from Wet, 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 everyone is a Celtic supporter in the arts community.
The art that comes out of Scotland.
Oi. Some of the best bands, thank you very much, come out of Scotland. Anyway, so we sort of discovered that we started to make a list, like just started mapping all of the, you know, artists and actors and musicians and stuff that were Labor leaning, and the ones that were Labor leaning weren't prepared to come out and have a swing at the opposition because they were so reliant on government funding and arts funding for them to survive. And so they just had to be apolitical. And the ones that were prepared to have a crack were Greens. And they're probably, you know, self-starters because their parents were rich and loaded. So so it was a real challenge. So to see someone like FriendlyJordies just
who built his audience. He wasn't.
Yeah. Absolutely. Amazing, you know, and more of that. Like, I'm certainly not comparing this podcast to the reach and the influence that FriendlyJordies has. We're not even in the same division, let alone league. But, you know, that's the mission of this show as well, is to create a space that isn't the Labor Party but is overtly pro-Labor. Do we agree with everything the Labor Party does? No, not at all. But
that's coalition building, isn't it? Like that, and that's the thing that I think Democrats, for all of their problems, are far more aware of the need to do coalition building, that it is not just a base vote that the party has and we have to convince a bunch of people who swing to vote for us. We have to get this part of the community, that part of the community, and we have to talk to them and build a coalition for our vote. And I think that having people like the FriendlyJordies is an example of that. Like, you're trying to build a coalition of like-minded people that aren't going to agree on everything, but they are important to the discourse.
Yeah. You were talking about something a little bit earlier on in when we were talking about this question. If FriendlyJordies is doing good content, good, authentic, accessible, funny, pro-Labor content, can we then compare that to some of, and you said we talked about it, we actually haven't talked about it because it only happened in the last week, some of the absolute shit online coming out from the federal Labor caucus after their first week of Parliament resuming. I mean, someone in the CTU needs to grab all of their mobile phones as soon as they land and tell them, no vertical content from you people this week. None whatsoever, okay? Like, it was...
Like, I am a little torn about it because partly I'm like, you should go out and try things because communicating with people is really important, and like some of it's going to look stupid, but it's fine. But a lot of it looked really stupid. And I think that there is a clear difference. It is not unlike, I have talked about this on the podcast before. It is not unlike what I was saying about the Age reporter saying that there's no one good at doing social media. Some of the content we saw does not fit the principles of clarity, authenticity, of message repetition. Like that is not what was happening. It was trying to find a trending sound and get yourself in a news feed without any message. It was just noise that we're adding. And some of it was very cringeworthy.
Do you remember that the fad about 2 years ago was online? The staff would put up a post that would be celebrating their MP's birthday, but we all know
Oh,
that it came from the MP
staff
themselves.
takeover.
Yeah, I know. We're in a new staff takeover era of social media.
Where everyone's just doing transitions.
Oh, it's fucked. And
I know, and I've seen
intentionally.
even some of the good MPs failing at this. And it is all like the other thing I don't understand is the strategy of it. So the point of doing a cross post is to draw from each other's audience and expand your audience. I do not understand how, and I'm not going to name names.
No, and that's
like
yeah, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that.
As much as I just don't understand why the Labor member for X in Victoria and the Labor member for Y in Queensland doing a post together is going to expand their audience. Like, it's not how cross-posting is supposed to work. If anything, as I said to a digital professional earlier this week, it has been made a lot easier to work out the friendship groups in the Federal Labor Party because they're doing little videos together. So lobbyists everywhere are like, oh, Blah's friends with Blah. I didn't know that.
Next time there's going to be a caucus spill and where people are trying to do the numbers, they're going to go back through and look at their Instagram feed to work out. Oh, no, we're not going to get that vote. They did a post back in 2025. Remember that really bad one when they,
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's going to happen.
Message to the federal caucus, please stop. Don't do that anymore.
I just do it. Just
be better. Okay, next question is from Jat. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. J-A-T. Jat asks... Actually, he also names checks FriendlyJordies. I get a sense from this podcast that federal Labor are dragging...
What is the overlap of your audience here, by the way? Like, are you...
No one knows. No one knows. I get a sense from this podcast that federal Labor are dragging their feet with comments such as ministers need a bit of a kick up the bums in their second term and that they've overcorrected from 2019 and are too cautious and not ambitious enough. I think he or she may be quoting some of the remarks that both you and Lissy have said in previous episodes.
I don't think I could be fed up with that. I would never have said kick up the bum. I think that was you.
Not directly quoting, but we've been saying that. Come on, let's be honest. Anyway. I can't believe you're disputing that. Like, we literally said that Paul Erickson and Jen Light should get a statue out the front of head office in Canberra. And if anyone at the caucus,
the message discipline that the last term Labor government did not have.
Yeah. Anyway, Jack goes on to say, FriendlyJordies has communicated that the future Made in Australia policy, Labor has a very detailed 10 to 20 year plus project to revolutionise the Australian economy for high-skill manufacturing, green steel, green hydrogen, batteries, etc., and cheap renewable energy that will place Australia as potentially replacing Saudi Arabia as a massive energy provider to the world, making us a semi-superpower in this space. Jad also suggests that Labor. FriendlyJordies has also suggested that Labor's been aggressively implementing this from day one. So the question from Jat to us is, so are they still not ambitious enough, or can two things be true at once?
No, what I'm hearing is FriendlyJordies are more pro-Labor than this pro-Labor podcast.
Yeah, probably.
No, both can be true. I don't think there's... You're going to say I'm going to be arguing around the margins here. I don't think there's anyone said anything on this podcast that nothing that the federal Labor government has done has been good. I think Future Made in Australia is a great industrial policy that I think that the Australian Labor Party should embrace more industry policy. I think that there's phenomenal spaces for Labor to run into in this area. I think that it's a fact. We didn't see a lot of Chris Bowen during the federal election campaign. In fact, I think one of the first times I've seen him in the last several months has been on this particular podcast, Stephen. So the idea that they have been only talking about a future made in Australia and that is one of their ongoing signature policies, it is a big part of their agenda, do not get me wrong, but no one is saying a future made in Australia is the reason they won the election. And I would also say that it's really good. I support it. I don't know that when you talk about, certainly when I talk about the reformist agenda I want to see from a federal Labor government, I don't think that this one is a controversial one. There are not many people that are going to argue that Australia should build more things and that we should be good about building the industry pipeline for energy in this country. So it feels a little bit like, yes, we're doing it. It's great. That's something we should be doing. This is a problem with Labor, the Labor Party and the progressive movement as well. We're like, yeah, that's great. We should be doing that. What else are you doing? So I acknowledge that as well.
And look, and that's what Chris Bowen said on the podcast last week, was that, we've made great headway, particularly in the renewable space, but most of the criticism we're getting is coming from
our own people,
the climate movement, saying, yeah, that's great, but now what?
Now what?
And I wholeheartedly agree with him on that. And to your initial point, yeah, like Chris Bowen should be up front and center in terms of, like, Lissy talked about, grid issues and then the ministers that were the ones that were doing most of the talking. Chris Bowen and climate should be on the grid, and he should be one of those lead ministers talking about creating Aussie jobs to transition us to renewable energies and picking fights with particular subsets of which are loud, angry, astroturfed kind of communities.
Tinfoil hatters.
Yeah, is great because that's where you get the controversy. You've talked about this. What Daniel's always been great at, Daniel Ant, is picking fights,
embracing the controversy.
5% of the population love, and then there's this loud, crazy cohort that makes up about 20% that hate it, and it's such a winner for us. And like you think about that crazy lot up in the Hunter that were saying that the offshore windmills were going to attract whales and going to crash into them and kill themselves and all kind of bullshit, right? Yeah, and just say, well, that's not going to happen, but just remember those windmills are going to be made in Australia by Australian workers.
Yeah, and I think that
why do you hate Australian jobs?
Your question is point. I think part of the frustration has been that when something like that has happened, and the Hunter was like unhinged, some of the commentary and like Dunn being down there being the saviour of the whales was just, it was unbelievable, and it was just entirely outside of Dutton's wheelhouse. And it was trying to over-politics. But I think the reflection, certainly from me, is that Labor managed it down is probably a better way to do it. We didn't run away from it. We didn't resile from our policy position. But it is not as though they went, yes, this is a fight that we are going to tell people about and we are going to say which side we're on. Now, I would make a slight change to your argument about how we talk about the transition and renewables. I think energy is an overcomplicated, in messaging sense, topic in this country. It is about keeping the lights on, and we actually don't need to make it more complicated than that. Coal-fired power is leaving. That is not a government decision. That is happening. And we need to have energy to replace it. It's a very simple message. And if not coal, then what? Insert some technology, be technology agnostic to some extent. I don't care. But have a plan and stick to it, because the problem is the keeping of the changing of the plan means we will not have a long-term solution to energy. So I think it's more energy that the government needs to be talking about, and the efforts they're going to keep the lights on. Because this whole liberal attitude of just propping up power stations that are well beyond their use-by date, like they're supposed to have shut down by now, is not a way forward. And I think that's how they look future leaving.
And I think the other thing to qualify from the question as well, and to the point you made earlier, I think this podcast was questioning or was curious as to what was the purpose of the government in the last term. Like, what was its North Star? I certainly don't think they were without ideas. It appeared to be all tactics and no strategy.
It felt a bit like even things like stage 3 tax cuts, which I thought was politically a great thing to move on. They tried to do everything they could to manage that down so people would spend less time arguing about it. They have taken an approach that an issue is well managed if people aren't talking about it.
Thank you for that question, Jat. Good stuff. Next question from Jason P., who's been a great contributor to the pod, certainly through the federal election weekly recaps. Jason says, one crazy thought and one question from me, if you have time, and we do. So we acknowledge that Labor is in an electoral commanding position and our enemies are at their weakest. Love it. Would you consider making a double dissolution trigger to keep in your back pocket to pull out when the Libs roll Sussen and the bloodletting starts? Imagine forcing them into an election in that state, a few more rate cuts and the ability to fully enact tax and policy reform. And that's his crazy thought. And his question is, I expect the Tory rags to continue to be as anti-Labor as ever, but how do you think the business community will react to the result? The Libs had heaps of cash at the last election. The bunting and the resources was ridiculous. I know it's a deduction, but surely common sense kicks in at some point where the Libs funding dries up. Why don't we do the question last, but just your thoughts on Jason's crazy idea about creating a double dissolution trigger?
I think that is definitely the kind of thing that I would have really been keen on in a internal ballot, student politics kind of framework where the politics is the game. That's the point. I think that the Australian public don't like politics for politics' sake, and they would see it for exactly the reasons you've outlined why it would be fun. Which is part of the problem, I think, happening in Tasmania right now, that I think that people are going to look at what Rockliff is doing as a bit of like politics for politics' sake, and possibly if Dean Winters does the same thing. Like, people do not like that. So while it's one of those things that'd be fun to game out and we particularly enjoy like chatting about it over pints, it is not a good thing that the Australian public would enjoy, even though we really like elections.
Yeah, and it'll give us something to talk about in the podcast.
Yeah, it'd be fun. I don't think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Let's take care of the home fires first before we get a little bit cocky and take the Ferrari out for a spin and start laying.
I think we're cocky.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a problem right now. I think we're pretty cocky.
Yeah, fair play. Okay, to the actual question then about fundraising. The heart of the question really is, when are we going to see the business community start to reallocate their funds to Labor, or at least not to the Liberals as much?
I have been talking about the business lobby, which I am not wholly against, which may not be a popular opinion on this podcast. I think there is a role for peak bodies of the business community, and the best policy is made when it is worked through. The Accord, which we all love, was come up with and designed with the business and industry groups. I have been surprised when we talk about the roundtable the Treasurer is having, I think, next week, maybe the week after. The Productivity Commission, like everyone's talking about productivity, and the Productivity Commission has put out a bunch of ideas to be discussed at that roundtable. And the union, the ACTU, the peak body, has come out with their responses and their views about what should be on the agenda and what shouldn't, and what their views are. I've not seen a lot from the business lobby as a group about what their alternative proposal is for productivity uplift. I feel like the business lobby, like, and maybe I have a perspective, particularly in Victoria, has a position where they kind of chip at different government policies, but there's never kind of an agenda that's put forward. And I do think that that is a problem, because it's hard for governments to just sort of react to one-off tactical complaints about a proposal around tax reform without a broader cohesive view about what the future of work is. And I think that the hullabaloo over the work from home announcement from the Allen Labor government over the weekend is an example of that. We've had a very strong emotive response from the business lobby. We have not seen a fact-based policy response as to why this policy is bad, apart from it reduces flexibility and, as Tim Wilson stupidly said, is an apartheid of some description in workplaces. I am not seeing a sophisticated approach from the business lobby. So do I think it's likely they're going to start funding parties that are not the Liberal Party? Unlikely. I think that there are members of those groups that have certainly swung money into the Teals, but I don't think we're seeing a lot of innovation when it comes to putting forward an argument from the business lobby right now.
Jason, it's interesting to note the stats from the most recent federal election haven't come out in terms of fundraising dollars raised by the two major, or by all the major parties. But certainly in 2022, the ALP raised 124 million at the election, and the coalition raised 115 million. We actually out fundraised the Libs. So, we often just assume that the conservative side of politics always is going to have more cash, partly because that's what it used to be, and also we keep on sending out email, like small dollar emails saying we're going to get outspent by the Libs. Mm-hmm. But in reality,
and fundraising is fine.
Yeah, or not fine. We always need to raise more money, but we've been raising more money than the Tories. I think that's the first time at a federal level in a while, but certainly in Victoria at a state level, we have fundraised the Tories. And in fact, if you remove the Cormac Foundation money that gets allocated to them, we've substantially out fundraised them. Now, granted, then they could counter and say, well, you get money from the trade union movement, but that the McCormack Foundation is different to the trade union movement. The trade union movement don't have to give us that money, and from time to time they don't give us that money. Whereas the Cormac Foundation, it basically is it's the Liberal Party.
To be fair, the Cormac Foundation have been withholding funds from the Liberal Party
in recent times. Yeah, absolutely. That's a whole other podcast.
That's
but the point I'm saying is that. Essentially since 1999, when progressive business it doesn't exist anymore, but when progressive business was set up, which is a wing of the Labor Party here in Victoria, which then became a national thing, and then all the other states did it as well, sought to modernise the way that they raise money, in which David Feeney and others went to Collins Street and said, we're going to win. It was after we won in 99. We've won. We're government now, and we want to see some investment from you guys into the left side of politics in this state and actually raise substantial money, which is the first time. We had not done that before. I know that sounds strange, but up until that point, Labor didn't actually do that. And David and others changed that mindset.
And it is a model that's been carried out in the rest of the country, like
right across the country,
for instance.
Yeah. And so we are competitive in that space now. And in fact, so by example of the 22 federal election, we were a clear $10 million more than the Tories. And that if you'd said that to someone in the 70s, they would say that would be unheard of. Also, if you said to someone in the 70s that we raised 120 million, that would probably freak out. But things change. Anyway, so
I remember talking to one of Federal Labor's phenomenal fundraisers, who I will not mention, and I said, how do you, is this a really awful job, rocking up to people and being like, can I have some money, please? And she said, well, no, particularly with the big corporates. I turn up and I say, well, I know you've put $5 million aside for them and $5 million aside for us. It's not, the numbers aren't that big, but numbers or whatever. You've put $5 million aside for us and $5 million aside for them. Why are you making it hard for me to get to the money you've already earmarked for me? You are going to give the same to both sides. So your decision right now is to give it to us right now, or to make me fight for it for some reason, which is a very effective strategy. But it is true. Most of the big ASX 100 companies have a fundraising strategy where they donate to both sides.
Yeah.
And the Greens and the Teals.
They want to have a bet each way.
Yeah.
And a couple little chips on the smaller numbers as well. Okay, next question. Thanks, Jason, for that question. Great question. Next question is from Pax, P-A-X. Stephen, and you spelled my name with a V. It's PH. Stephen said, thankfully, UK, this is what we talked about in the last episode, the last Feeney Files episode. Thankfully, the UK has a 5-year term, so Labor has time. I don't believe this is the case. The government just expressed the belief that social cohesion in the country is dangerously fragile. Labor MP up in the north, Lisa Nandy, is afraid her region will go up in flames this summer. I believe it's 1 minute to midnight in terms of the country breaking the notion of the government is losing legitimacy. Labor don't have a second to spare. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts is he should write our urgency emails for fundraising.
Yes,
because that was a very compelling argument about why Labor needs to move. So I thought that was great.
Apart from that, anything else?
I think that the last federal election, which we were very clear about when we thought the tide changed and how much we won by, and it was really in the last sort of 12 weeks, 16 weeks of government where we felt the election was won in a landslide and it was anyone's game before that, demonstrates that as much as things don't look great in the UK, I have to agree with that, there's always time. And I think Boris Johnson showed that in previous elections as well. And even the resurgence of the Tories at the last election, where they did better in the campaign than anyone was expecting. So that doesn't mean I don't think they should start trying to fix things now and just leave it for the last 12 weeks. But I agree with Stephen that in the end there is a long time and you can move back.
Look, when Pax
that is about winning. That is not about us descending into some sort of social dystopian disaster.
Yeah, and I guess I thought about that part of the question from Pax, and in my reflections, he or she, I should say, is right to be concerned. But this social cohesion question is not just happening in the United Kingdom; it's also happening in Ireland. We saw massive protests from the far right in Dublin last year. It's happening in Germany, particularly in the eastern part of the country. It's happening in France. It's always happening in France. It's happening in Italy.
It's definitely always happening in Italy.
Yeah, and these governments, are not addressing the basic economic needs of its citizens, and there's lots of reasons why. And then some folks that are feeling the worst of it are looking for someone to blame, and the other scapegoat becomes migrants. And yeah, look, I think there's a broader conversation to be had about the EU's open border program and its proximity to North Africa and the Middle East, where there's so much unrest and so many people seeking refuge and wanting to go to Europe to get away from all of the violence and civil wars that are going on in all those parts of that part of the world. And then how Europe manages to welcome those people and look after those people. And these are all really complex and challenging. And unfortunately, what we see is then social media and the Tony Robinsons of this world, and I can't remember what his actual real name is. It's like David Johnson III or something. Oh, God, he's got some posh name that would be in the starting 15 for the Wallabies.
There's a reason he calls himself Tony Robinson.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, because he's meant to be a person of the workers, working class. They're feeding upon this insecurity, and social media is a great way of doing it. And we're seeing a lot of it happen here in Australia as well. But I would say to Pax that what is happening online doesn't always reflect the view and the will of the majority of the people. And it's always the large silent majority that exists in liberal democratic countries like the United Kingdom. And, if you think that, like he was talking about in the north of England, that people are jack of it. Well, my family's from even further north. They're from Scotland. That's been completely ignored by Westminster for the last 800 years. They're completely jack of it, but they manage to get by and they do things, and my cousins, Jesse, them, you've met them all, just good, honest, hardworking, middle-class people.
But not necessarily Labor voters.
No, and it bounced around. And they're jack of it as well, but they're not storming.
Sorry, to be clear to everyone, they started as Labor voters.
Yeah, they did. And they voted SNP like most, Labor got reduced to one Westminster seat in Scotland. But I guess the point I'm trying to say is that just because there's a loud, angry mob rioting in front of police barricades out the front of a refuge centre in northern England, that is not a reflection of the will of the entire nation. And so therefore I call into question that social cohesion isn't actually breaking down. It's just that the media are reporting the stuff that they have that will sell papers and will get clicks.
I don't think that we can just ascribe that blame to the media. I do think the algorithm and other things, like a lot of people are getting their news not from the media anymore.
I'm not blaming. I'm just saying that that's what happens.
No.
It feeds the
I'm
beast,
saying, though, that the hyperbole of the whole situation is only exacerbated by the way that we consume information now. And it's through some pretty fucked up videos.
Yeah.
So that was really uplifting and happy.
I know. Well, we're going to end on a high one because we're going to end on your pet topic, which is a great question from Jake. And if it's the same Jake that came up and said hello to me at the end of our live show, Hello, Jake. And I hope you're doing well. And I appreciate you coming up and saying hi, and also coming to support the live show as well. So we've left the best for last. Jake, it actually was an unanswerable question for our episode with yourself and David, but it's still worthwhile just getting your thoughts on why. He says, why is Channel 7, why are they campaigning for the LNP at the next election? I watched the numbers of YouTube clips on Melbourne Metro Tunnel. It's all negative towards Melbourne Metro and Suburban Rail Loop. It's embarrassing to watch former City Loop architects look at Melbourne Metro stations before it's opened, and then Channel 7 turn the story into a negative about how bad Melbourne Metro is and how Suburban Rail Loop is going to blow the budget and the need for the project to be cancelled. So Jake is clearly a big supporter of Suburban Rail Loop and Melbourne Metro. Melbourne Metro, which is about to open later this year, of course. And I know we talked about Suburban Rail Loop previously on the show, but I'm just going to lob a softball right down the middle of the plate there, Jesse, and you can swing away.
I don't think I'm going to say what you think I'm going to say, which is I don't think they are necessarily campaigning against the Labor government or for the NLNP. I think that there is a general challenge within the media class and a bunch of the commentariat in Victoria that has this very anti-parochial view of Victoria, and certainly whether it existed before COVID, I don't know. But far out, Victorians that are on TV cannot kick the shit out of this state more. And part of that is, oh no, Melbourne Metro isn't half as good as, what's going on in Sydney. It's as good, if not better. It just... They got started with theirs. They were elected before us. They got started with theirs early, so theirs open like 10 months before ours. And this general need for The Age, the Herald Sun, Channel 7, Channel 9 to just absolutely beat the shit out of anything Victorian. And they wonder why Victorians do different things when it comes to an election than the kind of things they're lectured about in the media. They are surprised by that. But like Heidi Murphy's a very good example of that. Like I have not seen anything that the government has done, and I say this not because I think she's necessarily pro-liberal. They're just always looking for something to complain about. And like in Queensland, the Courier Mail, I have not been a Labor government up there, but I've seen the way they've treated a bunch of the Labor MPs. They are not a pro-Labor rag, but they are a pro-Queensland one. And I don't know which media outlet in Victoria are pretending to be pro-Victoria, because if there was one, we would have seen a campaign for some federal funding out of any one of the outlets that run in this state.
Yeah, I mean, the Herald Sun do try to frame themselves up as parochially Victorian, but their actions completely undermine
We're
their
for
market.
you now. We're not there, we're for Victoria. Their tagline is we're for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I agree with you, Jake, but I actually don't know that it's partisan necessarily. It's anti-parochial.
Well, we'll look forward to the positive reporting of the Melbourne Metro stations, all 5 or 6 of them when they open up later in the year. Yeah, just watch that. Watch this space. That's it. Mailbag done. Thank you so much to Jake, Pax, Jason, Jat, Joe, Kazza, and Capital Bomber. Lots of J's. For sending in your mailbag questions, and let us know, everyone, if we should do another one of these. Maybe we'll do one monthly. I don't know. We just thought we'd trial it and see how we went. If you think this is a good idea, just drop us a line on our various social media platforms, because we don't get a lot of feedback. Honestly, it's kind of a weird. Good. Yeah, no news is good news, right? Although I will say this, you and I went to a Labor Party event last
don't talk about this.
Thursday night. I won't say what it was, but I'll just say we went to a Labor Party event, and we had a bunch of people come up to us and say really appreciate the show and really positive. So I really thank you to those folks that came up and said that, because honestly, and as I said to you guys on the night, we don't get any feedback at all. We just do the show. The only feedback is we can kind of see download numbers. But even then, they're a bit patchy in terms of the data. So we're just we're guessing. And seeing what lands. So if you think this is good and we should do more of it, then that would be great. But also that means that you need to contribute and send in your questions. And the way to do that is to follow us on our Patreon page. The link to the Patreon page is in the show notes of the podcast. Come and join us there, and you can drop in your questions for our next mailbag if we do one. We'd love to hear from you. Jesse McCrone, thank you so much for your time. Again, done a bit of heavy lifting, 2 episodes in a fortnight.
All I'm hearing from your feedback is that you want more people at Labor events to ask for a photo with you. That's what I heard.
Hey, you were in that photo too.
Yeah, not because I wanted to be. You pulled me out of the crowd.
All right. Jesse, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Always a delight.
Hey, Social Democrats. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. If you like the show, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.